Welcome back to Transvox. And sitting in front of me, looking resplendent, is Michaela Pashley. Is that some sort of leopard skin thing you've got going on there, Michaela? Is that
Yeah, this is from Quiz. So, strangely enough, I love Quiz. It's my favorite shop to go into. And I know you think, oh, it's budget bridesmaid dresses, but it's not. It's awesome.
fantastic? Well, fashion tips are already started. But listen, thank you so much for joining me, first of all. It's sometimes a real joy for me to talk to people in the trans community who are making waves and making things happen, and maybe just chat a little bit more about their personal lives more than the sort of business side of things. So thanks for joining me, first of all, Michaela. Well, why don't you start by just telling us a bit about yourself?
So, my name's Michaela. I am a proud transgender woman, and I live a pretty normal life. I live in Glasgow. I have a couple of businesses that I run in the financial world. And I also run a blog on LinkedIn called The Reluctant Activist, which comments on transgender issues.
Oh, all right. Okay. So let's have a think about this. So let's pick the first thing first. Lots and lots and lots of people, and people don't know this, lots and lots and lots of people in our community are very entrepreneurial. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about mental health and all the different stuff that goes on. And I think that makes us a really great, resilient community. And you're an entrepreneur, you said. So just, I mean, without going into those businesses, tell us how you became an entrepreneur and what does that mean to you?
So I became an entrepreneur because I had an idea. I had an idea for a particular venture, and I was an employee at the time. And I went to my employer and I said to them, I went to my employer and I said to them, I've got this idea. Do you want to go? Do you want to do it with me? Are we going to do
Mm,
this together?
mm.
And they said, Michaela, to be honest, we're not interested. So I said, fine, I'll do it myself.
Right.
And I did.
And that
I
is the
made,
traditional entrepreneur story, isn't it? It's spotting a gap. Nobody else wants to have the do it, and you just go for it. So that must have been pretty scary. Tell us more.
it was scary, but now it's just so normal. So you think, oh, you're not going to know where the next paycheck's coming from. And I think that the key thing about being a business owner is you've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You've got to
Mm.
be comfortable, not necessarily knowing where the next paycheck's going to come from, but be quietly confident that something will turn up.
Yeah. And is there something about being trans that feeds into being an entrepreneur, would you think?
I think so. I think that I don't necessarily think it's to do with being trans because we don't really choose if we're trans or not. But I do think that people who undergo gender reassignment, they they're not conformists. They
Mm.
will do everything they can to be themselves and live their life in their way and on their terms. And, screw what anyone else thinks. And I also think that's quite an entrepreneurial
Yeah.
mindset.
Yeah.
I don't want to work for someone else. I want to work for me. Even if that means I'm on like a bit less money or it's my name above the door. I'm doing this. I'm making my own living on my terms with my clients and working with the people that I want to work with.
Mm. I see. I love that, and I think sometimes trans people have spent a bit more time getting to know themselves. They're a bit more self-aware, and then sometimes that self-awareness can breed anxiety and all sorts of things, but also can believe this. It sort of generates this fuck off attitude, which is, do you know what? I know who I am. I know what I stand for. And if nobody else is interested, I'll just get on with it. And there's some research, isn't it, saying that the sort of, I don't know which generation we're in this week. So excuse me if it's, I don't know if it's Gen Z or whatever. So, because I'm very old. So I'm older than all of them. So, but there's the move towards traditional employment is falling away. And actually more youngsters are going into things like franchise businesses, which take some of the risk out of being an entrepreneur. And I just wonder whether that antsy, slightly chippy take on the world, I think that's useful.
I think it's a good thing, but the government seems to hate it.
Yeah, I've noticed.
Yeah, I think the government would rather we all worked for one big employer. We'll call it UK PLC, one big employer, and everything was everyone was employed and everyone was on PAYE.
Yes. Yes, because things are not easy to be self-employed or to set up a business or to run a business. And I think people often say, and I often talk to people in the trans community say, oh, businesses are terrible, businesses are shocking, businesses are this, everybody in business is a ruthless capitalist and all horrendous people and such like. And and having been in business all my life as an entrepreneur and whatever it is, it's so far from the truth. There's a struggle that goes on when you run a small business, which is so far from being the managing director of Barclays, isn't there? The reality of running your small business is very different. I mean, what's your experience of it?
What my experience running a small business,
Mm,
compared to being an employee.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that. It's not because for me, before I became or years ago, right, years and years ago, I was business development manager for a big company called Prudential. They've now rebranded to Pru, and they're part of M&G. Now, that was very much like running your own business because you had your own
Mm,
panel of clients that you had to manage, and yeah, you had your manager, but ultimately it was up to you to make money. And you got a
mm,
basic salary, which was very, very small, and two-thirds of your salary was bonus. So it is kind of similar to that
mm,
in a way, but without the management and without your colleagues. And you know what? I enjoy the freedom. I
yeah.
enjoy the flexibility to choose when I work and who I work with.
And I think that's interesting as a value, isn't it? Sometimes we have to make these trade-offs. I also think what you've done is that you've highlighted yet again for me one of the key criteria here, because nearly everybody I've met who's a successful entrepreneur has had some time in sales. And that does teach you to be slightly more hard edged. It does teach you to deal with rejection. It does teach you to deal with people who slam the phone down on you. That's what I used to do in my day. But you get used to that, and you just know it's a numbers game. And what you have to do is you sort of get over yourself and get on with it. And I don't
Yeah.
know if that's necessarily, and well, I think it is great training to be an entrepreneur. And I think it's great training to be a trans person, actually.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's interesting you mentioned about dealing with rejection. I think that, but personally, I think that there should be a rule that your first job, whatever your situation is, rather than doing like a gap year or a year at uni or whatever, you should go and do a sales job for a year and just learn about people and dealing with people because most jobs in any kind of industry are sales. Because if you're not selling a product, you're selling yourself
Yeah,
and you're selling your own credibility. So yeah, I would definitely advocate everyone being in a sales environment, even for a short amount of time,
yeah,
um, as a learning experience, because people we have a bias, don't we? We tend to think that everyone's like us and
mm,
everyone shares our views on the world and everyone
mm,
wants what we want. And it's only when you spend some time in sales and you get to know a few people
yeah,
who want something different or think differently to you or have a different perspective, you realize that the world is very diverse. It's full
yeah,
of very different people with very different perspectives.
yeah,
And I think that's an important skill to learn in life.
yeah. And people get very bent out of shape sometimes about saying, well, if I'm selling, it's all about money and money is a dirty thing. But money is just an indicator, isn't it? What's the word? It's just a measure. That's what I'm looking for. And as you say, sales is everything in life, and whether you're fundraising or selling or whatever it is, you have to learn that. I'm so pleased you said that because I've long believed that, and I've met so many people who have been senior people in organizations, and they've always got this element of sales, or sometimes they call it marketing or business development in their background. But it's that understanding of what does another person need, and how can when I'm in sales, actually have the solution, and they have a problem, and it's that sort of reframing of things. And I often think that's the situation for us as trans people. We've got a particular situation, where are they coming from? And I think that allows you to understand there's a heck of a lot more people who are out there supporting us or ambivalent about us than the small number of people who are really against us. And sometimes they don't even seem to know why.
Many of them don't. I've written extensively on transphobia in my blog, and a lot of it stems from not understanding the science or
Hmm.
not accepting the science, which is funny because they'll accept science on just about every other topic. They'll accept the scientific consensus on any other topic, but when it's science that conflicts with their personal little worldview, that it'll be rejected. And
Hmm.
we saw this we've seen this before with vaccines. We've seen it before
Yeah.
with evolution, and
Hmm.
more recently with things like flat Earth. which is just honestly ludicrous. And now we've got this kind of this weird transphobia. And I remember growing up, no one really used to care about trans people.
Mm.
Um, we weren't really given much thought. But now all I need to do is open up X and just page after page after page after page, 99% negativity against trans people. And it's just
Yeah.
this constant barrage. And it must be a pretty sad existence,
I
hating
just
people that are nothing to do with you.
Yeah, but part of it's just bots, isn't it? And part of it's just, I, and I think part of it is a modern phenomenon. There's this sense where whenever you get on a Facebook group or an Instagram feed or a TikTok thing, someone's got to have a go. And it's based on nothing. It's based on simply on experience bias or confirmation bias, isn't it? And this idea that, well, I don't believe that, so therefore it can't be true. Or, well, I met someone who said this once, therefore it must be true. And it's such a parochial, narrow way of looking at the world. And I think one of the things, we mentioned sales earlier. One of the things that I did was when I was at school, we had to be in debating societies. Now, I went to a real
I was the one.
skank end comprehensive school, so this ain't posh, but we were forced to do debating and we had to argue a case, and we also had to argue the opposite side of the equation as well. And I think that's really liberating mentally for people to be able to consider a different side of the argument. Did you say you did as well?
Yeah, I did. I remember the debate that I was involved in, and it was, is today's terrorist tomorrow's freedom fighter? That was
Yeah.
the big debate that we had. And I mean, I was very, very young when I did that. And so I didn't really understand what the hell I was doing. So, but yeah, I remember debating, and I grew up, and I always loved a good debate. I always loved a good civil discussion, and I think that in many ways we've lost the ability to do that. But also, I'm sorry, but I don't believe that absolutely everything is up for debate.
Mm,
So, for example, I don't think that flat Earth is up for debate. I
mm,
don't think that evolution, as in whether evolution takes place, is up for debate. Similarly, I don't think that debating about or people's basic fundamental human rights and
yeah.
whether or not people exist, I don't think that is up for debate either, because it
Mm,
comes at the cost of human dignity.
yes.
We would never debate whether one race was superior to another, for example.
Mm.
Um, and of course we shouldn't, because it's ridiculous.
But it's a challenge, isn't it? It's an ethical and philosophical dilemma, isn't it? Where you say everybody has the right to their opinion. And then you say, yeah, but you can't say this. And I think the problem here is this sort of how you mix and match people's different opinions. So I am sure you and I can have a debate or a discussion about something, but A, I wouldn't be trying to change your mind, and also I wouldn't be screaming at you because you're wrong. What I'd be saying is there's a value in the discussion, and people have sort of lost that learning element. So initially, when we went on social media, it was fascinating, wasn't it? Because people would be having Twitter. Do you remember Twitter at the beginning? People were having all these debates and discussions, reporting things, and suddenly we were seeing things in different parts of the world we'd never seen before and saying, my God, ah, and then it's sort of been hijacked, isn't it? And I think it's quite interesting seeing the philosophy of free speech being hijacked. And I think that's what we're seeing now. It's that old idea, isn't it? That one person's freedom is another person's terrorist.
Well, it's kind of like back in the day, there were that you. It's like, yeah, people say that Twitter replaced text messaging. I'm of the opinion it didn't replace text messaging. It just replaced people's kind of idle thoughts
Mm,
that they would usually mutter to their spouse or keep to themselves.
yeah.
Um, but it used to be that you could say whatever you want, engage in whatever you want, but being being a dick for the sake of it wasn't really tolerated. It wasn't really
Mm,
tolerated by the users, and it wasn't really tolerated by the social media platforms. And over time, we saw what we call community guidelines come in, say, look, come on, guys, be respectful of other people's views, have a debate, have a chat, whatever. Let's connect, let's build knowledge, let's share ideas,
mm,
um, but don't be a knob about it. And now we've got this small kind of group of people that are saying, oh, well, the fact that I can't say horrible things about trans people or gay people or whatever, And
mm,
that's infringing on my right to free speech. It's like, but
mm,
on that platform, you're just being nasty and you're not saying anything instructive. You're not bringing anything to the table. You're just
mm.
being nasty. And now what's happened is that we've got the purchase of X that went through the rebranding of Twitter to X. And now there don't seem to be any rules there.
But there are
Around.
rules. I mean, there are clear rules, which is that there is a clear agenda to promote one side against the other. So I think X is as far away from free speech as anything else. I mean, we're seeing that everywhere. I mean, the thing is, if we actually went back to free speech, it would be quite a good idea. Now we've got someone who's litigating, what's it, $20 billion because they don't believe something is true. And it's like, this is how you stop free speech. This is how you my God, I'm going to start saying this is how you stop democracy, and we're going to be off on a political rant. So I'm going to stop myself because you're the guest and you're supposed to be talking. So I'll crack in there. But it is right. This punching down thing has become a feature, hasn't it? Punching down at marginalized or more vulnerable communities is a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean I think that it's been historically worse for gay people and people of color. I think that they really had it bad for a long, long time. But what's happened is over the last kind of decade or so, trans rights have been more of a focus,
Yeah.
and now the media's jumped all over that. They've absolutely jumped all over it, and in places like newspapers that used to be somewhat respectable, like the Telegraph, they write awful, lie-ridden, just horrible hate pieces about trans people. And personally, I don't get it. I really
We
don't
did
get it.
about
And
3 or 4 episodes ago, we did an episode talking about how the right wing think tanks, where they're funded, who funds them, how much money has been spent in America and UK. And actually, it's obvious what they're doing now in terms of trans rights, next is LGBT rights, and it's all to get at cis women's rights, and have that Christian sort of white replacement theory thing going on. Cis women back in the bedroom or in the kitchen with their feet against the door and doing what they're told. And there's this massive march back towards 1950s values, and even in the States, tearing up as many of the constitutional amendments as possible is all part of that. So it makes sense. The issue is it's not very nice being in the middle of it, but I don't think that the difference between the massive movement, which is actually just using us as an excuse, and individual nasty people. So there's a case in your part of the world, isn't there? And I don't want to name the person, but of a nurse and a doctor and that or a care worker, whatever, taking against a trans doctor. But we're discovering that this person who's in the middle of this trans row is also in the middle of a racist row and also in the middle of all hate speech rows against every single vulnerable community. And sometimes you just have horrible people, don't they? And they're just horrible. There's, like I say,
what was really interesting, Gillian, was when the race thing came out, and I'm not going to really comment on the case, but when the race thing came out on X, there were so many people making excuses for the racism.
yeah, of course.
And it was honestly eye-opening that you're prepared to overlook something that is contrary to just about everyone's values in 2025. You're prepared to overlook that to try and justify something else.
Yeah, but you see, I think the point here is that there's a bunch of people in the country who don't understand why that's a problem. So they'll look at the list of jokes which were made against a particular race, and they just say, "Oh, we're just having fun. It's just been funny. We're just being funny. There's no problem here."
Well, it wasn't funny for the people involved in the flood.
Of course not. But I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying I genuinely don't. I mean, there's a degree of stupidity involved in this, which is also weaponized. And I think people think that there's a massive plan. There is a massive plan, but there's not a massive plan to weaponize everybody because they're thoughtful and intelligent. They're weaponizing people that don't know anything, who just want, it's the old Animal Farm thing, isn't it? Wasn't it? It was two legs bad, four legs good, or whatever it is. You want a lot of people just shouting and making a noise, and the people who have the thoughts can stand back and just mobilize the great unwashed. That's what I see happening all the time. And I think once you can read through that, you can sort of move yourself away and protect your own mental health. Because the last thing any of us needs is to be, sort of outers or, the subject of some sort of pylon. My colleague Jenny was subject to one of those pylons about 20, 15 years ago when She was out. She was picked on after a television performance, and that was, she said it was terrible. And that was 15 years ago. Can you imagine what it's like now? I see Joe Lockwood going on to GB News, and Tate, I forgot the surname, not Andrew Tate, the other one of the trans community, was on telly recently, on This Morning or something. Just the abuse and the horrible stuff after just having the gall to sit down and talk to a very shouty woman who was very religious and
Oh,
saying
that
we
was
have
that
no right
case,
to resist.
the transgender man.
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah. I saw that. I think it was on. I think it was on LinkedIn. I heard about it,
yeah,
and there was a screenshot shared, and I looked it up on YouTube. And yeah, the horrible things
yeah.
said. It was honestly shocking. But a lot of there were a lot of ignorant comments as well that you just see on all these posts. They don't actually know the difference between sex and gender. They
No,
don't
not interested.
understand. Well, even when we dissect it, even when we look at sex, they and this is my kind of theory on this. So as you know, sex is a constellation of biological characteristics, right? So it
Yeah.
includes genotype, it includes hormone profile, anatomy, and various other things. And they obsess with genotype.
Mm,
It's all they seem to care about is genotype. And the reason that they care about that is because it's the one thing they know we can't change.
yeah.
And if there was a machine that magically changed that tomorrow, and my phenotype wouldn't change
Mm,
because, of course, it wouldn't because I'm already female presenting. But if that invisible thing that doesn't matter really to me was to change overnight, and I was to do a test and it came up as XX, do you really think that they'd accept me? Do you
no,
really think? Of course they wouldn't.
they
And
don't
we saw
accept
that.
intersex people, do they? So,
Yeah. Well, I saw this on X this morning. There was a man identified as a man, but they were phenotypically a woman.
yeah,
They identified as a man, and they'd evidently, or they appeared to me. I don't know this for sure. But they appeared to have been assigned male at birth, and they appeared to be on feminine hormones, and they completely identified as a man. They said, "No, I'm a man, but this is how I present myself. I'm a man, and I've never used women's spaces, and indeed I've tried to protect them." Now, do you think that the community on Hex, do you
mm,
think that that person was accepted? Do you think that it was, oh, right, well, great? No, of
no,
course not. Because it's not about women's spaces.
no,
Even when you get someone who says, I'm not, I'm not accessing women's toilets, I'm not
mm,
doing women's sports, I'm not, and I identify as a man, even when you've got all of that, they still don't accept you. And it just
well,
shows it's not about toilets. It's
no,
not about spaces. It's not about toilets.
no.
They just think that we're weird.
And we
Um,
talk about gender identity, and you'll talk to people about identity. And say, oh, yeah, I understand the concept of identity, but why don't you understand gender identity? Say you don't understand religious identity, social identity, job-based identity. All these things are identities, and gender identity is deeper. Oh no, that's the one I call. That's the one. It's really interesting. It is really interesting because I think we've emboldened, or the GC world has been emboldened, and there's a lot of people who are being radicalized. There's a big political thing going on. But I was in a group this morning, and there was a gender critical person in there, and we started by chatting very, and then I suddenly discovered that we were talking about women and girls and women and girls spaces and violence against women and girls, and I was thinking, oh right, okay, I recognize this dog whistle, and weren't brave enough to say anything to my face. But what they've done is complained afterwards and said I couldn't express my gender critical views in that room because there was a trans person there. I'm saying, well, we won't even. There's nothing to do with trans stuff at all, but my very existence makes them feel diminished. That's quite staggering, isn't it?
why are we using the phrase gender critical?
Yeah,
To me, gender critical
bigots.
is a rebrand of transphobia.
Yeah,
It's a little bit like, because we've spoken about business. It's a little bit like a few years ago. Do you remember when we had businesses that called themselves pyramid selling schemes?
yeah,
And then they rebranded, didn't they? Because of course no one
yeah.
wanted to be involved in a pyramid scheme. So they rebranded to multi-level marketing,
That's right.
and
Yeah,
then more recently direct marketing.
yeah,
And this is just, it's the same rebranded crap. It's
yeah.
not changed the business model.
No.
So
It's
with
bigotry.
transphobia, gender critical, and they say, oh, well, we just believe that there's in the biological reality of sex, and that there are two sexes. No, but this is the thing. It completely misses the point that trans people agree with that. Broadly speaking, we do. I mean, obviously, you've got intersex people as well. So, and when we're talking in a scientific or biological context, we know that sex isn't binary, because we've got we've got intersex people, and that therefore makes it not a binary. We can't include everyone in that binary, therefore it's not a binary. But trans people are well aware of our sex. We're not trying to change the scientific consensus on sex at all. What we understand, or those people that understand the science of sex and gender, is that sex is different from gender. We can split gender down into two components. So we've got gender identity, gender presentation.
Yeah.
None of these things are binaries, nor are they necessarily congruent with each other, let alone with sex.
No. And and the thing is, there's no logic to this situation. I think we're going to have to grit our teeth and get on with it, just like entrepreneurs do in a funny sort of way. So, we're back around to that. I mean, your own story, we haven't talked much about today, but and we don't have to. But are there any sort of things from your own journey story that might add some enlightenment for other trans people going through processes today?
It would just be, again, and I mentioned this on the other session that we did, if it's safe to do so, be visible, be yourself, never be afraid to be yourself. It's really, really cool to have to fight for who you are. It builds a lot of character, it builds a lot of strength. And remember, the next time that someone says anything nasty to you online, or some nasty little troll says anything to you, you've done more to be you than they will ever have done to be them.
Yeah. And they're the weak one, aren't they? Because actually they're the ones who are reacting to it. So, and also we don't have to involve ourselves in that space. I mean, I do sometimes take issue with parents who say things like, well, I can't stop my children going on social media. I mean, you can. That's why you're a parent. But there you go. Maybe I'm more old-fashioned. So talk to me about the blog. So is it reluctantactivist.co.uk?
No, it's on LinkedIn. So just go and follow me on LinkedIn, Michaela Pashley.
So that's really important not to look at that one, because that's the wrong one.
Yeah. So just follow me on LinkedIn, Michaela Pashley, and yeah, you'll be able to go and check out my articles. And my articles is accompanied by a little bit of artwork, and then there's an article on trans people. So recent ones, I've done 10 questions that have been asked by my professional network on transgender issues. I've done one on debunking the transphobic science that these transphobes and gender critical types come out with, and really kind of getting into what the actual basics of the science of sex and gender are. And I've done one more political than anything else recently on Keir Starmer and Keir Starmer's Pride Party.
And the new Section 28, which I think is a very good article.
Yeah, I did one on Section 28 as well.
The new Section 28, because I think we really need to be clear about that, don't we?
Section 28 2.0, on the new RSHE school guidelines on sex education.
Yeah. And I think as a trans person, I think we need to look at that thing, because again, that doesn't have to be brought into play until 2026. But schools are bringing it into play now. I mean, faith schools look for any opportunity to get aside. I want to save my joke about crimes with guys in dresses, but I'm not going to say it on here. So there you go, because we're more sedate surroundings today on the podcast world. Michaela, you're a brilliant advocate for our community. You've got a brilliant story, you're a fantastic entrepreneur, you've got tons to say. If people want to reach out and connect with you, are you happy for them to do those sorts of things? And if so, where would they find you?
Yeah, you can contact me on LinkedIn. So if you want to chat with me about business or anything like that, then feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. Michaela Pashley on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram at transmichaela, and I'm on Threads under the same name at transmichaela, and that's my kind of online presence.
Queen of branding. That's all I can say. Right then. Super. Well, look, thanks for spending time with us today. I know we probably didn't half talk about all the subjects we wanted to talk about, but it's been really fantastic. And thank you for being a brilliant advocate for the community, because we've all got our part to play, haven't we? And you're doing yours. So thank you so much for spending time with us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Gillian. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much. You take care.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.